Kelly asked me to say a few words, and she was asking me to say a few words, but I got working on it, and I've got 5 or 6 minutes.
Go ahead.
And
Okay.
at 5 or 6 minutes, there could be time for questions at the end. So, Ross is my chosen big brother.
Big, yes.
I chose him decades ago. And I met him in 1984, 40 years ago, when we were competing medical equipment salespersons. And I had been working for a company that was the industry leader in the state of Florida for a couple of years, and I'd had success. And moved to Atlanta from Fort Lauderdale because I became a regional manager and started to have success in the southeastern United States, and then I met him. And he started to beat me. And he beat me as badly like you would beat the family mule. And it was humiliating. And after a year of that, having been successful, now getting beaten, I found a new job. And then he hired me a couple of years later. And we went work together in 1987, and we worked together for 40 years, the better part of 40 years, except, as you know, when I had those years off for bad behavior. and as we worked together for 40 years, we trained salespeople and we worked against salespeople, and I learned that humiliation was part of the strategy. You know, if you beat the competitors so badly and humiliate them, then the competitor goes and finds a new job. And then the new person, they won't want to stick around because they don't know what to do. The night I met Susan, Russ and I were at the end of a week-long trip in North Carolina where we were going from town to town, hospital to hospital, where we didn't have time for lunch often, and so I would buy peanuts in the shell and throw the empty shells over my shoulder in the rental van, and Russ would say, "Why don't you throw them out the window? They're biodegradable." And I'd say, "Because that would be bad karma, and Avis has vacuums." So when we got to Midlothian at the end of this trip, Steve was in town. I met Susan and Steve on the same day, and they looked into the back of that rental car with peanut shells and gas station coffee cups, and they were aghast. And despite that, Susan welcomed me into the family. It was 1987, and Kelly was a toddler, and Courtney was an infant, and Chelsea, you weren't quite there yet. And I'm about a third way through. I sailed with them many times. And they're both really good sailors. If there are 3 of us on the boat, I want to be the second mate because I know Susan can do all the stuff that I can't do. And one trip we took with the girls in Annapolis out of the Chesapeake, I brought along some fishing equipment, fishing gear, and I said, "Hey, would you girls like to go fishing in the morning?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, we have to be really quiet." And so at 6 o'clock in the morning, the 3 little girls are in the cockpit, and we take off to the shoreline to fish, and
In the dinghy.
in the dinghy. And I'm thinking, if we catch some fish, then I can teach the girls how to fish, and they'll enjoy it, and they'll love to fish for the rest of their lives. And on the first cast, I caught a scraper. And so, whoop, whoop, whoop. He was pulling the dinghy from left to right. And I was thinking, this is going to be great. You all are gonna have a fishing experience. You all catch fish. I'll throw it out. You reel it back. And on the next cast, I hit a log. Do you remember this? A log on the shoreline, and I'm with these three young women. And am I talking too much here?
No, you're good. No, go ahead.
I think I'm only 3 minutes into it. And
You're
I hit the log, and I can't go like this and like this because I've got the three little girls in the ding. So instead, I grab the line and I pull it straight at me, just like that. And the lure, the treble hook, freed itself from the log and came like a bullet into my hand. And we'd been out, I don't know, 8 minutes. and it's like, okay, so we were really quiet getting out of there. We have to be really quiet getting back there. So don't say anything. We'll be okay. I've done this before. Their eyes were like saucers, like pie pans. They were so scared. Don't you? And so we get back in the cockpit. I'm sorry I'm boring you. I'm sorry, all of these. We got back in the cockpit, and there's like, be very quiet because it's 6:15 and they're all asleep. And they said, Jim caught himself! Jim caught himself! And created this alarm where you all had to come up on deck. And they came up on deck with bedhead and no coffee, and Susan tried to get the hook out, but you had no tools, and
It was 3 prongs, too.
oh my God. Well, I had one really inserted with the treble and with the barb. And so we had to go to Anne Arundel Medical Center, where right before we got there for a very simple hook removal, somebody had shown up with MI. And so they had the heart attack team going, and it took hours and hours, and I apologize to you all for wrecking that Saturday. I'm getting there. These children were raised well, I believe. They were raised to respect themselves. They were raised to respect others. They chose good men. Where's the other one? Where's Stephen? They chose good men. And they have lovely grandchildren. Julia, lovely. Lovely. Okay, I'm getting there. I got a fun fact for you. Fun fact? Russ loves to buy women's clothes.
Fancy dresses.
Did you know that?
We saw the picture.
We saw the dresses and the shoes.
And particularly shoes, right? And so he buys these 6-inch stilettos. Hey, I'm out. You need to go to the principal's office right now. Do not pass go. She buys these stilettos, and Susan humors him. And so one time we were exiting Los Angeles after the company meetings, and we were driving down 101, and he says, "Hey, do you mind if we stop at Frederick's of Hollywood? Because I'd like to." I said, "Yeah, sure, I'll read the paper. Mind my own business." And so we get in there, and I found a chair, and I've got a newspaper, and I'm reading it and doing the crossword puzzle. And 15, 20 minutes go by, and I can see Ross looking at shoes, and there's a sales guy, and after 20 minutes, the sales guy says, "Well, is he a 12 or a 13? I'm almost there. I love this about Susan and Russ the best, right? I think their marriage works for 40 years because Susan is patient. Russ, I think we will all agree, has a full personality. And from time to time, he goes off. Stephen. And it's like, yeah. And I think the way it works is Susan is really patient, and she calls him precious. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. And I've heard multiple times when he is on one, she says, she waits and she waits and she waits, and then she says, Precious, are you finished? And it shuts him up. So, I believe these two adore each other. And it's a successful marriage for 40 years. And I know you all love them. And I invite you to raise your glass and salute to Susan and Russ. Salute.
To Susan and Russ.
Good job, Jim.
Thank you.